Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dread Time Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Phobia, and tonight I decided to do something special for you guys. I did some research with my own family and discovered 3 stories that are, as far as they tell me, true. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's 3-part special, Truly Terrifying. When my grandfather was a kid, he grew up in a very rural section of the state of Kentucky. Clay Hole was the name of it, and that literally is what it was, just a clay hole. So, the mountains were very treacherous as far as the roads were concerned, so it was a lot simpler to take a horse instead of a car. My grandpa lived on one side of the mountain, and the general store and everything else was located on the other. So, running a little late before the sun was setting, he decided to take a shortcut. Instead of going around the mountain, he decided to go over it. Now, from what I was told, at one point the road actually forked, and not ever taking this trail before, my grandpa became lost. Luckily for him, he said he saw a cabin off to his right, and an old man sitting on the front porch on a rocking chair. So he rode up to the old man and said, "Excuse me, sir, I've never taken this trail before," and explained where he lived. I don't know, do I need to take the left or the right path?" And the old man just sat there. So my grandpa thought he was hard of hearing, so he spoke up. "Sir, I don't know which way I'm going. Do I need to take the left or the right path?" The old man still didn't give a response. Now, my grandpa had a very quick temper, if you will, so he became a little agitated at the man. This time, he shouted at him, "Hey, old-timer, are you listening to me?" Still, no response from the man. So, my grandpa went to spit his tobacco that he was chewing, and instead of spitting it on the ground, he spit it right at the old man's face. The chaw made contact with the man's forehead and slowly dripped down his nose, and as it did, the old man never moved a single inch. Freaked out, as any normal person would be at this point, my grandpa decided just to take a chance and rode as fast as he could down the left path. Luckily for him, that landed him straight at home. 2 days later, he decided to ride back into town for something else and take that same trail that he took that night to come back home. And to his surprise, the man nor his cabin stood by the roadside. Back in the 1960s, my aunt grew up in Detroit. She was meeting a friend for lunch one day during the month of December. The ground was completely clear, no snow, no nothing, as she approached the diner. She had lunch with her friend. They were there for about 2 hours, just talking and, idle chit-chat. Well, after she was leaving, she noticed that it had snowed. About 1 to 2 inches, let's say, just a light coating. So she left the diner and walked down the same alley she had taken to get there to go home, when she noticed something strange in the snow. Footprints. Now, you're probably wondering, how is this strange? Well, the footprints began in the middle of the alley and ended in the middle of the alley. Just about 10 feet of footprints. And here's the other part that's strange. You know how your toes face forward? Well, these feet, imagine if you took your toes and went at 90 degrees so your toes were facing to the left and to the right, directly away from each other. That's how these footprints looked. They started from nowhere and they ended nowhere, as if something landed from the sky. The house my grandmother grew up in was haunted by a spirit that they nicknamed the Gambler. You see, the legend goes that the previous owner of that house was a gambler. And apparently he screwed over the wrong individual. So he was riding home one night, and someone picked him off with a rifle. And my grandmother said every night you could hear the horse ride up to the house. A single shot could be heard, and you could hear the saddle hit the porch as the horse frightenedly ran towards the barn to where it thought it was safe. Now, the other instance she told me about in this house is once she was awoken by her sister, who was laying in another bed in the opposite corner of the room. She heard her sister whisper her name, Rose. Who's that in the doorway? My grandmother, half awake, replied, What? What are you talking about? That's when she could make out the outline of her sister pointing towards the door, and there in the doorway were 3 people in old-time clothing, a man, a woman, and a little girl. They simply stared at my grandmother and her sister, not moving, for a few seconds before turning down the hallway and not making a single sound. My grandmother threw herself out of bed and ran to the doorway and looked down the hallway in the direction they went, and she swears up and down that that darkened hallway was completely empty. Well guys, I know they're not the scariest stories on the internet, but honestly, being told directly to my face all of these tales really sent shivers down my spine, and I'll be honest, it takes a lot for that to happen. So I hope you enjoyed them, and thank you for listening. Like I always say in closing, check under your bed, look in your closet, and sleep with the light on. The life you save may very well be your own. Good night, everyone.